Right, this is a list of our speakers for today. And we'll be going through each of these as we go. Next slide. So our agenda, we'll hear a warm welcome from our Regional Commissioner, Lisa Pearson. We'll be getting an overview of GSA's IRA programs from J.D. Dennis with our PBS Climate and Infrastructure Program Management Office. We will be getting an overview for LEC construction materials requirements from Walter Tersch with our PBS Architecture and Engineering. And we'll be getting a LEC considerations in the procurement process from Michael McCurdy, Office of Acquisition Management. And I'll be covering the projects that we have in Region 10 for IRA LEC. And then we'll have a wrap up and close out with Matt McGinn from our Region 10 Acquisition Division. And then we'll cover in a short question and answer session.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. And welcome, everyone. As Rick said, my name is Lisa Pearson. I have the great honor of serving as the Regional Commissioner for PBS's Northwest Arctic region. As I was thinking about this today and welcoming all of you in this new virtual world that we're in, I'm always checking calendar invites to figure out, am I saying good morning, good afternoon, all of the above? And then I really looked at the calendar invite and realized that for those of us living in the world of the federal government, probably the most appropriate salutation today is Happy New Fiscal Year to one and all as we celebrate moving into FY25. For Region 10, we're pretty excited for this fiscal year because we do have a number of planned projects that will be covered by this program and that we are hoping to be able to leverage low embodied carbon materials. That's really why we're here today, is to hear from experts about the Inflation Reduction Act, about low embodied carbon materials, not just their specifications, but also what that means for the procurement process, and give you a little bit of insight into those planned projects and what might be on the horizon that you might be interested in here in Region 10. Thank you for taking time out of your day and for being here. It is time for me to turn it over to the smarter people in the room, and we're going to start with J.D. Dennis, who is with our Climate and Infrastructure Program Management Office and can give you a little more information about our Inflation Reduction Act programs in GSA. Take it away, J.D.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that very much. Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here with us today, and I'm happy to be a part of this presentation with you today. I have a few slides to give you a high-level overview of the Inflation Reduction Act program with regard to GSA, and then I'll turn it over to Walter. Next slide, please. As you're aware, the Inflation Reduction Act is the single largest investment in climate and energy in American history. These are a few of the things that this legislation seeks to achieve and major outcomes thereof. GSA's role in this is leveraging the four materials you hear more about today: asphalt, concrete, glass, and steel, and really how we can invest those dollars across the breadth of our portfolio to help the administration achieve these outcomes, as well as move the markets with regard to those four materials in particular. Next slide. For GSA, $3.375 billion is a lot. When you apply a limited amount of time to execute most of that funding, it adds additional pressure. There's a lot of money here: $2.15 billion for the low embodied carbon materials and $975 million for emerging and sustainable technologies. That money all expires at the end of FY26. So we have effectively 2 years to obligate the balance of that funding. And so that's not a lot of time in the government world, but we are working forward efficiently and effectively to obligate those dollars. You'll hear a bit more about the LEC materials in particular as we progress on the program today. Next slide. As I alluded to a couple of slides ago, we're looking to invest this funding as much as we can across the breadth of our portfolio. And we really want to make sure that our portfolio, the buildings that GSA is responsible for, are sustainable, energy efficient. And within that, we're putting America back to work. We're creating a lot of jobs in distributing this funding across the country. And we're improving our energy and operational costs in the course of doing that. Next slide, please. To give you an idea of kind of what we mean by that is, we have about 8,000 properties across the country. Not all of those are not owned necessarily, but those 1,500 to 1,600 assets that we own, we're investing this money in those assets. Long-term holds that we're going to keep for the long term. So we're investing the money wisely for the taxpayers' benefit. We're catalyzing the market to generate and be innovative in developing low embodied materials, which we've seen a great progress over the last year since the Inflation Reduction Act was passed in August of 2022. And we're really expanding our energy savings performance contracts to make those buildings more efficient. So we're looking at this holistically. And what we're looking for you in the marketplace to help us do is invest these dollars wisely and effectively. And Region 10, the Northwest Arctic region that we're going to hear about today, has quite a few projects that are presenting us with some good opportunities to help our customers with their mission accomplishment with CBP, for example, as well as furthering our portfolio for long-term use and operability. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to Walter. Walter is our preeminent expert on LEC materials, and he will give you a very in-depth overview of the materials themselves and how they're helping us be more sustainable. And Walter, take it away.
Great, thanks JD and Rick. Next, please. So what is embodied carbon? Embodied carbon is essentially the emissions that are associated with making the things that we buy, particularly focused on construction materials. For 50 years, people have been focused on energy efficiency. That's easy to look at because you change the light bulbs or replace your insulation, you see your bill go down the next month. Up until the past few years, the material emissions, which constitute about a third of the built environment's total climate change impact, were kind of out of sight, out of mind, because it was easy to not think about what happens, in the manufacture of concrete, steel, and other materials that are the literal foundation of our Western civilization. So these materials are very important, and we have this Inflation Reduction Act appropriation, over $2 billion, specifically not just for low carbon materials, but substantially lower levels of embodied carbon compared to industry averages as determined by EPA. And we have only got less than 2 years now to obligate all those funds. So we're really the tip of the spear at GSA because we're the first agency to be nationally implementing a buy clean program that imposes limits and seeks to spend our money on lower carbon materials. But we had no shortage of deferred maintenance needs in our portfolio that could be matched to these material types. There's other exciting work happening at Federal Highway Administration. They're going to be giving grants to states and tribal and local government organizations for the $2 billion that they got, with essentially the same strings attached. And then there is some help in terms of grants that EPA has made some selections for. They also have some technical assistance coming up, and the Department of Energy has industrial grants to sort of help with the changes. But in many cases, next slide, please, it's more of a paperwork problem than it is a need to have dramatically different materials based on our experience to date. So there's different life cycle stages. In the product stage, which is cradle to factory gate, is the focus of our current policies, pursuant to the guidelines that EPA has laid out for us, along with the fact that that comprises 70 to 80% of construction materials' total emissions. And third and finally, because this is what we have data on EPDs. Next slide talks about what an EPD, or Environmental Product Declaration, is. Some of you have probably heard the analogy. It's like a nutrition label, but for materials, and it's a sound analogy. Instead of calories, you have global warming potential, the energy associated with making the item. So it's independently verified, created by a manufacturer, and it provides information in a relatively comparable way about the environmental impact of materials. So it can help inform purchasing decisions, And we wouldn't be the federal government without at least 4 different alphanumeric acronyms per slide. So in addition to EPD, you might hear GWP, global warming potential. And then the numbers we use are the carbon dioxide equivalent, CO2. Next. So in terms of how we got here, like JD said, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed about 2 years ago. We actually did a series of 3 requests for information in 2022. We put out a public draft version at the start of last year. We incorporated a slew of fantastic input we received from the industry, launched a pilot in May of 2023, and then started applying things more broadly a little bit less than a year ago. So GSA is part of the Federal Bike Lane Initiative. We're not the only agency doing this. We're just lucky because we've got appropriations as well as decisive leaders that wanted to put points on the board, put the the tires on the road, all that. And we're excited that we've got money out the door on double-digit IRA low carbon projects so far. Next slide, please. So the request for information got over 130 responses from manufacturers. So we heard from companies that were doing things like insulation and roofing, which we care about a lot, but we don't have permission to use our IRA money for that. Concrete, asphalt, steel, and glass are the initial focus because they comprise a majority of what the federal government purchases. I think those are big quantities because of the amount that the government spends on the U.S. interstate system, and they account for nearly half of all U.S. manufacturing emissions as well. So there's room to potentially improve. Next slide, please. We have here a breakdown of the types of industries that responded to our RFI. Trade associations, some of whom I see represented on the call today, thank you, provided really fantastic input, and we're really thrilled to continue the industry engagement. We've had at least 3 dozen engagements over the past couple of years with different trade associations and companies. And we got comments essentially talking about, hey, there can be a trade-off between saving energy and upfront carbon. We've got policies that help account for the whole 60-year lifespan of a building, minimum analysis. And, we have received some great input about, carbon stored in materials, et cetera. Next slide, please. I mentioned that EPA made the determination about what substantially lower carbon means, because substantial is not a term of art. It can mean different things to different people. Instead of saying, industry average minus 10% across the board, it tasks GSA and federal highways with choosing the lowest carbon 20% of materials where available for each material type, failing that lowest 40%, and failing that better than industry average or lower carbon than industry average. So we use that in our source selection process that Mike will be walking you through in about 5 minutes. Next. We set these global warming potential limits, which are available at the gsa.gov/IRA website. And we have them for 18 different subcategories of materials in these 4 categories. And we set those using a combination of industry-wide EPDs, where the industries themselves had said, hey, here's our average, as well as product-specific EPDs. So we got a fairly robust data set that we used to develop these limits. And product-specific EPDs can be generated by manufacturers using EPD generation software. I'll talk about that in just a second. Next, please. Here's a screenshot of one of our requirements tables. I included the one for concrete because that gets a lot of the attention, because most of our projects use at least some concrete, whether it be vertical or horizontal construction. So these limits are generally plus or minus in terms of comparison to industry averages. Our better than average limits tend to be one way or the other similar to the industry-wide EPDs. So far the limits have proven workable. Next, and it's in many cases just a paperwork issue of getting manufacturers to develop the EPDs, which is not as hard as it might seem, especially for concrete and asphalt, where there's software to help with it. Next, please. So we have an implementation update. I have a slightly newer slide that will be in the deck that you'll be receiving, that essentially mentions that we've seen over 17,000 additional EPDs get published in the first year, quadrupling of the number of EPDs in our asphalt category. Fantastic work by the glass and steel industries to produce more sustainable options that still meet the government's performance needs in terms of durability, longevity, customs and border protection requirements for border stations, all that. So, we've seen companies step up in parts of the country where there were none before, like North Dakota, West Texas, upstate New York. So we really applaud the industry partners, including a lot of fantastic small businesses that have stepped up to the plate and recognized that, hey, we're just playing the cards in the hand that we've been dealt here. We've got these requirements, and it's not up to us whether we can waive them or not. They do matter. So we've got 150 projects in 39 states, including at least a half dozen projects that I'll be quiet soon so you can hear about in Region 10. Thank you. Next slide, please. So yeah, I'm not going to get into too much detail on these. I'm just showing essentially that to determine compliance, we look at the numbers on these global warming potential documents, these EPDs, compare them to our limits, see which bucket and which tier is met. So this one was top 40% because 1350 is just under our limit of 1370 for glass. Next. We also make sure that the right product category rule is used. I know I'm getting a little wonky here, but essentially that's just the rule book for what the EPD includes and how it's produced. There's industry leading ones in North America. So that's usually pretty straightforward, particularly because we're also subject to the Buy American and Trade Agreements Acts. So we are, wanting to make sure we're buying compliant materials and making sure the documentation aligns with the North American product category rules. Next, please. So here's a map of where the EPDs exist. So there's certain parts of the country that have wide open holes. We've also seen some improvement since I screenshotted this map from a publicly freely viewable source a few months ago. West Texas now has a concrete EPD, thanks to one of our suppliers stepping up to the plate in an area where we've got substantial border station projects. If you saw Alaska on here, you'd see it's sparse, as you would expect. But getting an EPD can literally put companies on this publicly viewable map, which is powered by the EC3 database, which is a comprehensive database of these declarations. Next, please. So there's business sense in our view to getting an EPD. We also require them for non-IRA projects in our P100 facilities standards, which are essentially like a building code that applies to GSA projects. They're in our scope of work templates, and for IRA, we can't waive these requirements. So all GSA projects that use at least 10 cubic yards or a truck worth of concrete or asphalt needs to have an environmental products declaration. So it's not IRA specific. Even after our IRA monies are spent, it's something that we believe can help make you competitive and qualify for GSA's requirements on our other projects as well. Next, please. So there's other state and local buy clean initiatives. These slides link to a page that shows all the different state and local governments that have these as well, including federal government agencies as well are working on these. And we do use these during our source selection, as Mike will show you. Next, please. Also, lead projects. So the market demand for EPDs continues to increase. We've heard rumors that lead V5 might have a prerequisite that will go to the need for environmental transparency and EPDs. GSA takes a whole building approach that also benefits from this. So in short, the business decision to develop an EPD can yield a competitive advantage in our view, can help show market leadership, distinguish your offerings, get you listed in databases, directories, and maps. And there's over $4 billion that GSA and federal highways have with that string of an EPD attached. You can see the breakout of our $2 billion across material types there. Next, please. There are tools to get EPDs. GSA does not endorse or warrant tools, but we can tell you that we are familiar with concrete. Climate Earth and Theta EPD are two leading tools that are kind of TurboTax style to help streamline the process to get a concrete EPD. So Theta EPD can be as little as $1,500 for National Ready Mix Association members. For asphalt, there's Emerald Ecolabel EPD tool. One of our projects 2 years ago was able to get its first ever asphalt EPD in 5 weeks because we asked without any impacts to cost, schedule, quality, or budget. So we were really thrilled to see that that's doable. So it could be, 5 weeks to 120 days or so to get an EPD. And after you're over that first hump, it should be relatively easy. So we linked to a general overview to provide more detail. And I'll also be monitoring the chat to help answer questions. Next, please. And this is my last slide. Hooray, I'm sure. So we have links here to our LEC requirements, frequently asked questions, the Federal Buy Clean Initiative, showing that other agencies are moving in this direction as well, along with a really cool module we have at sftool.gov that is a whole module about embodied carbon. So it lets you click on different parts of a building to see opportunities, looks at official definitions for different things, can really help answer a lot of questions in a user-friendly way. And with that, I'll pass it to our associate, Mike McCurdy from GSA's Office of Acquisition Management.
Great, thanks, Walter. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike McCurdy, and I'm here today on behalf of the PBS Office of Acquisition Management to talk with you about low embodied carbon and construction solicitations and awards. I'll review some of the activities that may occur in projects in the pre-solicitation phase, the typical proposal submission requirements during the solicitation phase, as well as several post-award requirements. I do want to advise that these are the activities that projects will typically follow. However, please keep in mind that whatever is stated in a specific project solicitation and contract terms and conditions is what should be followed. And if you have any questions on a project, always reach out to the contracting officer. Next slide, please. First, let's talk about some of the pre-solicitation activities that you may see with projects that contain low embodied carbon materials. Now, you may be familiar with sources sought notices or requests for information that a contracting officer would typically issue on websites such as sam.gov in order to find construction contractors that are interested in or have the capabilities and experience in performing similar types of work in order to help determine acquisition strategies. While project teams are still doing this, we're also taking this to another level. We're trying to get a better understanding of the market availability of LEC materials. For example, what's available, where it's available, and when it's available. Also, do the products already have EPDs? So we're using our time in the pre-solicitation phase to gather this information. We want to make sure that the products that we are specifying in the future solicitation are available so that we can ensure that we will be able to utilize IRA funding and have an awardable project. We will also share this information since our goal is to maximize the use of LEC materials and to achieve top 20% as much as possible. We know that supplier networks may differ from company to company, so we want to share this information with potential offers. Keep in mind that when we share this information, whether it's via an amendment or through other channels for other IRA projects, for example, we will not disclose technical solutions, supplier pricing, or supplier offer terms and conditions. Next slide. Next, you will see a very specific pricing structure for projects that plan to utilize IRA funds. All IRA and non-IRA funded work must be separated in order to properly track and report. While tailored for each individual project, this slide does show an example of a project that utilized IRA and non-IRA funds, including all three pots of IRA money, which are low embodied carbon, emerging and sustainable technologies, and high performance green buildings. Not only are these three pots of money separated, LEC is broken down even further by the type of materials used on the project. For example, steel, asphalt, glass, and concrete. So offerors will be able to include not only the material costs in these cleanse, but also the expenses necessary to accomplish the acquisition and installation of IRA work. And we'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide. Next slide, please. So what types of expenses can offerers include in the IRA cleanse? Some of the examples of these expenses are provided here, and they include transportation expenses, labor, tools, and design expenses that can be reasonably attributable to the IRA funded work. Next slide. There will be a source selection evaluation factor that allows offerers the flexibility in proposing the level of LEC materials, while also favoring those materials with the lowest possible global warming potential. Next slide. So I thought it would be best to walk through step by step of how the evaluation factor is created, what the offer submits, and how it's evaluated. And then I'll have an example on what this looks like in the next few slides. But first, project teams identify the IRA eligible materials that are included in the scope. Then each individual material will have a weight assigned. The total weight for all materials adds up to 100%. There's an IRA factor sustainability table that will be attached to the solicitation, which is a spreadsheet where the materials and weights will be provided to the offerer. Offerers will identify materials and the IRA limit commitment for each material based on global warming potential values. Not only do they identify the IRA limit commitment, meaning top 20%, top 40%, or better than average, but they also provide the backup documentation to support their score, including that EPD. So the spreadsheet will calculate the weighted score for each material and the total weighted score. GSA will review the proposals and verify the scoring, which is then assigned to an adjectival rating. One thing I want to note here is that any supplier information submitted by any offers will be shared with the awardee, and there will be a note in the solicitation stating that we will do this as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the sheet that the offerers will submit. The offerer will only need to identify their IRA level commitment in the drop downs in the second column. The raw score, weighted score, and total weighted score will all be automatically calculated through the spreadsheet's formulas. So back to the sheet, the project team will only include those materials that are part of the project. So for example, if the project doesn't include asphalt, it will not be included on the sheet attached to the solicitation. So the fourth column is where the project team lists the evaluation weight for each specific material. This is a percentage and adds up to 100%. Now, offers will complete the second column with the IRA limit commitment, such as top 20%, top 40%, or better than average. The raw score will be automatically calculated in the third column. So for example, if they provide top 20%, they get 100 raw score. Top 40% is 40 raw score, and better than average is 20 raw score. That raw score in the third column is then multiplied by the government provided weight in the fourth column to get a weighted score in the fifth column. Then the material weighted scores are added up for the total weighted score. And let's see what this looks like in an example on the next slide, please. Okay, so for this project, the only materials are 5,000 PSI concrete, asphalt, fabricated rebar, hot rolled sections, and flat glass. The project assigned an evaluation weights of 20%, 30%, 35%, 5%, and 10% respectively. The offer was able to commit to the top 20% material for concrete and rebar. Therefore, they received the maximum score of 100 for those materials. Asphalt and flat glass, they could only find a supplier that can provide top 20%, resulting in a raw score of 40. And they had a hard time finding hot rolled sections and could only propose a better than average limit, which is a raw score of 20. These raw scores are multiplied by the evaluation weights to arrive at a weighted score, which is then totaled to arrive at a total weighted score, which in this example is 72. The score is then translated to an an adjectival score. In this example, the offer would have received an acceptable rating under this evaluation factor based on the project's adjectival rating methodology. Next slide. So how can an offer receive an exceptional under this factor? That's easy. If they submit all top 20% materials, this would equate to the maximum score. In other words, you can only get a score of 100 if you submit the best products. Please note in the near future, we also may be adjusting our evaluation scoring as a means to incentivize contractors who are able to provide the lowest carbon offerings. Next slide. Now let's talk about a proposal that doesn't provide at least better than average. We make it very clear in the solicitation that if you cannot provide all materials that at least meet the better than average limit, then you'll be rated unacceptable and ineligible for award. Next slide. Okay, so in some cases, because of project location, availability of materials, and delivery method, EPDs aren't yet available for certain materials, but we expect them to be by the time construction is ready to begin. We've learned this in the case for some in remote areas, for example, with concrete, because there simply is not a concrete plant nearby, and there will have to be, for example, a batch plant established. But since that batch plant doesn't exist yet, neither does the EPD. This is not the standard process, and as I caveat in the slide, this is project specific, and offers should refer to the exact requirements in future solicitations and reach out to the contracting officer. But having this alternate route will allow us to have awardable projects that can still utilize IRA funding, keeping in mind that offerers are still required to propose their IRA level commitment with their proposal, but the EPD would not be required until after award and before the notice to proceed with construction. Next slide. Similar to a competitive requirement, the solicitation will only include those materials that are part of the project. Anything not included would be removed from this table. So the contracting officer will request that the offeror provide a proposal that favors provision of IRA eligible materials with the lowest possible global warming potential. The offeror completes the IRA limit commitment table, such as top 20%, top 40%, or better than average. Again, this is very similar to the competitive requirements, except there are no additional columns for raw score and weighted score. And then once the project team has reviewed the proposal, including the corresponding EPDs, and the CO is ready to make an award, the commitments proposed by the offeror will be incorporated to the resultant contract. Next slide. There are a couple of different post-award report requirements when IRA funds are involved. First, the awardee must submit a market report on IRA materials 10 days after award, with an updated report 90 days later. This details the contractor's process for seeking materials and evaluates the materials available in quantities and timeframes required by the contract. Please keep in mind that we are going to be sharing supplier information from the unsuccessful offeror proposals with the awardee, so this may provide some additional insight to the market for those materials. Next slide. The next requirement is only specific to those awardees that could not provide top 20% materials for all materials. Before they are able to receive a full or unrestricted notice to proceed, they'll be given a limited notice to proceed to provide a low embodied carbon materials research report, which is due 5 days after the limited notice to proceed is issued, to explain why they cannot meet the top 20% limits and details the contractor's process for seeking these materials. Next slide. There are also various submittal requirements, including the IRA project submittal form due with a monthly pay app. That's used to track sustainability impacts on IRA-funded LEC materials installed. Next slide. The post-award allocation form is due 20 days after award and breaks down the contract by division and further by LEC and non-LEC materials. And then next slide. And then lastly, contractors are required to submit EPD and product information during the normal submittal process. And that's all I have. This concludes my presentation. I'm going to now pass it over to Rick to discuss planned Region 10 IRA LSC projects. Rick?
Rick, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Again, I'm Rick Rocco with our Design and Construction Division in Region 10, and I'll be covering our planned Region 10 IRA LEC projects. Next slide. This is a basic disclaimer. We are moving forward with these projects in Region 10, but subject to change. Some things may change, and those be posted on our sam.gov announcements. Next slide. So here is all the potential IRA LEC projects that we have in Region 10 currently. All these projects have IRA LEC funding associated with them, either full or partial. The first larger projects on the list will each have a slide of their own with some more information, and we'll be covering those shortly. The three smaller projects in Washington, Oregon, and Alaska, they're currently working through their project planning phase and are planning on solicitations between FY25 and 26. All right, next slide. Our first project up is our Alcan Land Port of Entry. The Alcan Land Port of Entry is the only year-round full-service 24-hour port of entry serving personal vehicles and commercial truck traffic between Yukon Territory, Canada, and interior Alaska. It's situated in a remote location along the Alaska Highway. Majority of the adjacent areas of undeveloped forest, wetlands, and tundra. Alcan was established in 1972. The facility is now over 50 years old and in urgent need of replacement. This project includes replacing the existing port operational facilities, housing and community complexes with modern facilities that will meet U.S. Customs and Border Protection and GSA operational needs for decades to come. The project is currently working to finalize the project development study, working towards completion of its NEPA analysis, working to start soliciting the construction management / commissioning agent requirements, and in July of 25, soliciting our design build requirement. We are projecting IRA LEC materials of concrete, steel, and glass. All right, next project. Christy, can you move to the next project, please? Lost our presenter. There we go. Okay. Christy, could you reshare the slides, please? Okay, so we're back to our projects. This next project up is our Kenneth G. Ward Land Port of Entry. Kenneth G. Ward Land Port of Entry is a limited service port of entry operating 16 hours daily, serving personnel, vehicles, buses, and limited commercial traffic between Linden, Washington, Alder Grove, British Columbia. It's no longer able to meet the operational needs of Customs and Border Protection with an acute impact on international commerce. The port's limited commercial capability results in unbalanced demand and escalating wait times at other commercial ports throughout Western Washington. The expansion project will expand and separate personal vehicle traffic and commercial screening operations, possibly allowing for a 24-hour full service port operation. When completed, the port at Linden will feature 5 personal vehicle lanes and 4 commercial processing lanes. The project is currently working to finalize the project development study. We're working towards completion of its NEPA analysis, working to start soliciting the construction management / commissioning agent requirement, and in February 2025, soliciting the design build requirement. All right, next slide. Our next project up is our Sumas Land Port of Entry. The Sumas Land Port of Entry serves personal vehicles, buses, pedestrians, and commercial truck traffic between Sumas, Washington, and Abbotsford, British Columbia. Last modernized in 1988, the Sumas LPOE is no longer able to meet the operational needs of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. GSA will expand and modernize personal vehicle and commercial screening operations. Commercial inspection lanes will increase from 2 to 4, and personal vehicle lanes will increase from 5 to 6. Main building operations will be fully modernized, and dedicated pedestrian corridor will be constructed. The project is currently working to finalize the project development study, working towards completion of its NEPA analysis, working to start soliciting the construction management / commissioning agent requirement, and in February 2025, soliciting the design build requirement. All right, next slide. Our next project up is our Pacific Highway Land Port of Entry. The Pacific Highway LPOE is a full-service 24-hour port of entry serving personal vehicles, buses, pedestrians, and commercial truck traffic between Blaine, Washington, and Douglas, British Columbia. The port last expanded in 1999 is realizing notable increases in wait times, particularly for non-commercial personal vehicle and bus traffic entering the United States. The expansion project will add 4 new personal vehicle inspection lanes, expanding capacity to 10 lanes total. The project also expands the secondary inspection area to provide 6 enlarged bays for vehicle enforcement inspections, and adds 24 secondary main building referral parking spots. All inspection areas will include extended overhead canopies, replacement pavement, and upgraded lighting. This project is currently has a pending award. All right. Next project. Our next project up is our Henry M. Jackson Federal Building Plaza project. GSA plans to replace the failed plaza waterproofing to stop water infiltration and subsequent degradation of structural columns at the Jackson Federal Building in downtown Seattle. The plaza consists of brick pavers with a series of step terraces with seating and planters surrounding the building. The Inflation Reduction Act funding will support new low-embodied masonry and waterproofing membrane to repair the structure. Currently, the project is preparing to start its design phase with a construction award no later than the spring of 2026. Next slide, please. And our last large project up is our Port Hill Land Port of Entry project. The Port Hill LPOE is a limited services port between Port Hill, Idaho, and eastern British Columbia, Canada. It primarily serves personal vehicles and buses, but also processes a limited number of pedestrians, mostly hikers, and permitted commercial truck traffic. It is relatively remote, 27 miles northwest of Bonners Ferry, Idaho. After 55 years of continuous operation, Port Hill LPOE is no longer to meet the operational needs of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The port expansion project will enhance its operational efficiency and capacity, providing new, modern, and energy-efficient facilities to host port operations and processing functions. The project is currently working to finalize its project development study, has completed its NEPA analysis, it has awarded its construction management / commissioning agent contract, and in June of 2025, it'll be soliciting the design build requirement. Next slide, please. And I will be turning over to my partner, Matt McGinn, from our Acquisition Management Division.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew McGinn. I'm with the GSA Public Building Service Acquisition Division in Region 10. And Rick and I work together with our teams of project managers and contracting officers to deliver this program in the Northwest. Federal acquisition refers to the process of the federal government acquiring construction through contracts using appropriated funds. As JD mentioned earlier in the presentation, we have a timeline associated with the appropriated funds under the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we are looking forward to proceeding with our program, as Rick just detailed, for each of our large projects, as well as a few small projects. As the government's landlord, the Public Building Service is the largest public real estate organization in the United States. And we achieve our mission primarily through acquisition programs and partnering with you in private industry. The government seeks to partner with you to solve our complex challenges, share information about contracting opportunities, and also to gather feedback and connect with businesses to help create targeted proposals. I want to thank everybody who presented today and really appreciate the entire team's efforts for pulling together this industry day and this outreach. We hope that the information we provided has been helpful, and we really appreciate everyone taking the time to attend, because your participation and your inputs makes it so that together we can improve the quality, effectiveness, and sustainability of workplace solutions for federal agencies at the best value for the American taxpayer. Next slide, please. Christy. As we wrap up today's meeting, I just want to leave you with a few next steps. We will be publishing the projects that we mentioned in the upcoming fiscal year and through fiscal year 2026. And again, as JD mentioned, we seek to obligate these funds by the end of fiscal year 2026. So I want to encourage everybody to please tune in to sam.gov, look for those announcements, be on the lookout for some additional industry outreach, spread the word. We will be conducting some additional outreach events over the next few quarters. And we anticipate that our large LEC Land Port of Entry projects will involve prime teaming arrangements, as well as we expect a lot of subcontracting opportunities. Given the alternative project delivery that we've chosen for these projects, there will be questions that come up. And so we appreciate your participation and your input as we go forward. Next slide, please. Okay, for this industry day, we will update the SAM special notice by the end of the month. And we will be sure to include all of these attachments. Noticed earlier a few questions in the chat, and appreciate JD and Rick for answering those. We'll make sure to update the SAM notice and include the slides, as well as the question and answers that we'll take from this presentation. Next slide, please. Thank you. We wanted to provide a few additional resources and some points of contact. I want to encourage everybody, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. I've included my email address, as well as our program office. We really appreciate Walter and JD's support and all of our team at the national level in fielding program questions pertaining to the Inflation Reduction Act and also low embodied carbon policy questions. Okay, next slide, please. With that, we've set aside some time for Q&A. And again, I mentioned the questions that were posed by Colin Reed earlier during the presentation. Thanks again, JD and Rick. Colin, if those answers, for whatever reason, did not answer the question, feel free to come off of mute and pose any other questions or clarifications for that. Also, I wanted to thank Dresden Gregory, our Sustainability Program Manager. In the webinar chat, Dresden has included a number of really important resources that help explain some of the information we discussed today, and our presenters provided as well. So thank you, Dresden. With that, I'll ask the audience, are there any other questions? Thank you, Colin. Fully answered my questions. Excellent. And go ahead,
sorry,
Walter.
I just wanted to point out in the Q&A, we do have this question about connecting parties. So Gary Sabart had this fantastic question about, you know, how can material suppliers get in touch with GCs, I guess.
So I think this comes down to a little bit of research on the LEC side in terms of large, small businesses. But I think what we'll do is take this question for the record. We'll put out some additional resources, possibly some suggestions with that, Gary. But collaboration is going to be key. And as we look at large and small businesses or prime and subcontract partners, it's going to require some outreach, I think, on your part with some of those companies. And we just had one other question here. Read it. Is there any opportunity for alternate materials with less embodied carbon, like using mass timber in place of steel, for example? Who wants to take that one?
I'll jump in. I'll let JD chime in on if we have any projects there. Meanwhile, Christy, if you go back to slide like 27 or 28, we have a policy that kind of goes to this. So yeah, there is an opportunity to be using material. See, there we go. That's the 127. Yeah. So in a way, the third bullet here says GSA's new construction and major modernization projects must target a 20% whole building embodied carbon reduction. So this is designed to make sure that for our major projects, the designers are taking a holistic view at right sizing the amount of materials, at looking at alternative materials such as whether mass timber could be a candidate for displacing, for meeting the same needs in the building as a material like steel or in some cases concrete. And that 20% reduction is compared to a modeled equivalent building. So if it's a modernization, it's got to be a modernization. Same number of floors, same use, same location, same floor height. So we have a few controls on there. The link to our P100 decarbonization section. Also, if you go to gsa.gov/P100, open it and do a control F for decarbonization. That can show how there's a little bit more structure in there, such as a associated LEED credit that we require. So we're really excited to see whole building life cycle assessment start to be used by some of our major projects to help drive creative design decisions and avoid unintended consequences where we might have more high carbon materials being used or concrete that appears to be 5% lower carbon, but they're using twice as much of it. This whole building approach is designed to ensure that we're looking at the whole picture. So yeah, that's a fantastic question, and that's something important that we're actively tracking. We have a performance measure associated with that. JD, are we able to talk about whether we have any mass timber projects?
I don't know if we have any. I want to say we do, but I don't want to speak out of school. The only caveat that I would add to Walter's answer is we're not able to use IRA funding for mass timber, but obviously if the design solution is a mass timber product, there's nothing that prohibits that. The use of IRA funding is limited to the other four materials that we talked about: asphalt, concrete, glass, and steel. So I want to say the answer to your question, Walter, is yes. I don't want to get in front of the project team, but I want to say we have one where they're at least exploring mass timber as a solution. And there's another question that Emmett put in here. Emmett, I believe the project, and Rick can jump in here. The project I think he mentioned was Alcan, or it may have been one of the LPOEs. Certainly, if they're using asphalt, it needs to be measured much like concrete, glass, and steel. I think in the case of one of those LPOEs, they aren't looking to use asphalt. It's going to be concrete only. That's probably the distinction, but I'll defer to Rick to further answer that.
Yeah, so yeah, we haven't fully designed these projects yet. So we're obviously pre-designed on these. So we we consider whether it's asphalt or concrete, and it'll run those associated with all the rest of the IRA requirements.
And if I could, I appreciate that, Walter, JD, Rick, thanks for answering those. Real quick, I have to correct something I said earlier. The resources that were posted by our sustainability program manager, I'll go ahead and post those into the SAM.gov. There's some important resources. It looks like that was not published to everyone, just only the panelist members. And then secondly, I apologize. Apparently we cannot have you come off of mute. So appreciate everybody entering their questions into the Q&A. Really appreciate that. With that, I think we've answered the questions in the Q&A, but I'll continue to leave that open to the audience for more questions. While we're waiting and maybe there's some more questions being formulated, I just asked for the panel if there were any additional closing thoughts. Rick, if you wanted to state anything else related to our presentation today, or if we have any additional.
Yeah, so I mean, we have we kind of ran through the projects pretty quickly. We'll continue to develop these projects, and they're large, complex projects, and we're super excited to partner with industry, and because they have IRA LEC funding associated with each of them, it adds a complexity. But we're hoping industry can respond. Suppliers can work with contractors to develop relationships in order to get these projects awarded. So looking forward to that. One thing I will add, we will be putting together separate industry outreach for each particular project. So we'll have separate industry outreaches associated with Alcan, Linden and Sumas, and Port Hill, and the Jackson Federal Building projects. So more to follow on those, but those will be kind of templated in our winter, spring timeframe coming up here in 2025.
All right, perfect. We have one more question in there. Okay, IRA has a funding expiration date of 10/26, correct? Yes, so the end of September. So September 30th, 2026. How does GSA see LEC continuing relative to IRA expiration? JD, if I could ask you, and Walter, please.
Yeah, I can give it Walter may be better able to address it. I think he did relative to the P100. There are currently LEC requirements in P100. So the LEC need or the drive for more sustainable products isn't going to go away with the expiration of the IRA funding. What we will learn over the next 2 years, along with the FHWA program and EPA's further advancement, is can we synthesize around national standards regarding LEC materials? And that might further the progression of LEC beyond the expiration of IRA. But the LEC requirement, I think GSA has obtained and maintained a leadership role in driving that. But Walter spoke a little bit about P100 earlier. So Walter, I'll let you clean up anything I might have misstated.
Yeah, so we're learning from our IRA experience, seeing what works and what doesn't. For the 2024 P100, we opted to stay the course with just concrete and asphalt and certain interior finish materials having EPD requirements. We did not expand it to glass or steel in terms of EPD requirements and lower carbon. But one exciting thing that's you're going to be seeing in calendar year 2025 is the start of a low carbon material labeling program from EPA. So everybody's familiar with Energy Star and WaterSense. They're coming out with something like that for low carbon materials. So we're really excited about that because it's in the interest of industry, designers, and GSA to have simpler, more unified requirements in terms of lower carbon materials and what thresholds will qualify for government work. So we're really excited about that. So although there's a chance that, we might incorporate some of these IRA approaches into a future version of P100, like 3 years from now, right now I'd be more inclined to align with what EPA is working on, which is learning from and leveraging GSA's IRA specific experience, as well as what Federal Highways is going to be doing once their money starts hitting the streets, but creating a labeling program, which is something that should really ease compliance, because instead of having to look at an EPD, look at numbers, compare lists, you can just say, oh yeah, the carbon gold label is on this box. That's perfect for our contracting officers to choose. So we're really excited about that. And I think that's something that you're going to be seeing getting a lot of traction within and beyond the government once they start issuing some limits as soon as early next year. We'll see.
All right, great. Thank you for the question, Shelley. Okay, with that, I see that we've reached the time on the webinar, but if there are any other questions, if you want to input those, we'll stay for just another moment here. I wanted to thank all of the panelist members and the entire team for putting together this outreach event. And thank you to everyone participating today. We look forward to, again, having more involvement with you all. And again, want to emphasize that you can, don't hesitate to send an email if you do have a question or inquiry. And we will update the information to this sam.gov posting over the next few weeks. With that, I want to wrap up today's event and thank everyone again. I hope everybody has a great day, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.